G'day. Netting like this is great for protecting your crops from birds and other critters, but there's a few things you need to know when setting it up. I'll be showing you some tricks, but that's just the start of the great gardening we've got for you this week.
I'm visiting my friend Kathy and looking at some of the exotic food plants that she grows in her garden that come from her homeland in Papua New Guinea. And I'm trying them.
Hey, come with me. I've got something really good to show you. It is not often that you see a garden from the street that really excites you and you want to go and visit. Well, I'm going to be showing you what this garden's all about, and I can hardly wait.
This is Ripsalis platycarpa. This piece here is actually a modified stem. Every single node in there is actually a leaf. It's the same family as the Campbell's podoana, but they look nothing alike each other. And for me, that's just such an extraordinary thing to behold.
I'm going to show you something a bit different. I'm off to visit a friend that lives just a few minutes' walk from my place. Backing onto Wynnum Creek, Kathy Wilson and husband Ross garden on a large 2,500 square metre block.
We got hundreds of pumpkins going out on that lawn.
Kathy learned to garden in her homeland, Papua New Guinea, and she moved here in 1987. At first, a hook and line was the remedy for her homesickness.
I feel missing my home. Fishing is more or less something I talk to. But when I found this, it's more or less a home away from home.
Some of the garden is what you'd expect. Bananas, coconuts, and of course, sweet potatoes. But then there's those different things that I promised. Your taro's looking really lush, considering how dry it's been.
Yes, but I'm going to show you my Ibica.
Well, this one I have never seen. This one I have never seen. There's one over there with the large leaves, which I've tried to grow. And you've got another one over there, which I've never seen. Why do you grow so many different ones?
Because I love them all.
Fair enough. Now, we can't go past this other plant here because this is an absolute classic.
Okay.
Many Australian gardeners would recognise its weedy ancestor, palm grass, and they'd pull it out because it is a bit of a pest. But this is a really refined garden plant, isn't it?
That's pit. All you have to do is just break it like this. Break it off there. This is the part you eat.
So the leaf bases themselves.
Yes.
Do you eat them raw or do you cook them again?
We cook them.
Everything's planted quite closely here, isn't it? I can't help but admire these yams that you're growing. I've never seen them grown in this particular style. Is this a PNG way of growing them?
This is how we grow it. We put the yams in and then we wait till we see the shoots coming up. And that's the time we have to cut the stakes and put it in for the yams to climb on.
And it's quite manageable like this, so don't go crazy.
Yes, no.
There's one plant over there we've got to talk about, an edible fern. What part do you eat?
You eat the young, new stalks, yes. New leaves coming up, that's all you eat, that part, yeah. You can either boil it or steam it. You can eat it raw.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this plant is polycius, and I've seen it used in Vanuatu to ward off mosquitoes.
It's an edible plant too. Boil it and eat it.
And most Australians would just grow it in a pot and look at it as an ornamental.
Ah, okay.
That's a substantial fence. What are you trying to keep out?
I got 2 chooks.
Oh, fair enough. They'll do some damage.
See my beans?
Looks a bit like red dragon.
But it's better to pick it when it's young and tender. When it gets to this stage, it's all into seeds.
Is there any chance I could have some?
That's yours.
Thank you. I'm keen to try some of Kathy's unusual produce. The Ibica was rather like English spinach, only richer and more juicy. The pit tastes like mild asparagus and the texture is like steamed celery. I've ever seen pit being grown in Queensland. A bit like asparagus.
Yeah. And a little bit like bamboo shoot, which sort of comes in.
Yes, there's a little bit of bamboo shoot in there, yes. That's my first try at pit.
You
I
like
really
it?
like it. Yeah, I really do. But the standout plant was the polycius. It's a member of the ivy family, and the Englishman in me says you don't eat members of that family. But it was delicious. So, Kathy, when you're in your kitchen cooking PNG food, what goes through your mind?
Home.
Yeah? It's a nice feeling.
Nice feeling, and all the ingredients coming into my head. Put this first and put this one and add this one to it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. Thank you.
A lot of people ask, what's the best type of lime to use in your garden? Well, it depends on what you're trying to do. There are 3 main types of limes available to gardeners. The first one is garden lime, calcium carbonate. It's filled with calcium and it's really good at raising your pH. It acts very quickly. The second one is dolomite, very similar to garden lime, but it's also got magnesium carbonate in it. It acts very slowly, and it's great for trees like your apples and your pears that really love that magnesium hit. And lastly, this is gypsum, calcium sulfate. It has no effect on the pH of the soil, so it's really good for adding calcium to ground that has plants that like acid, like rhododendrons and tomatoes. Now, it's known as a clay breaker, and it's really good at breaking up clay, especially reactive clays, but it has a positive effect on the structure of all soils.
On the fringe of Melbourne's southeastern suburbs, near the township of Beaconsfield, is the garden of Judy and Jason Millington.
It's covered. Look at all the hoverflies.
Oh, yes. Well, they've come out. This dynamic duo has transformed a steep hillside covered in pine trees into something quite special. I believe that when you came here, you had very little gardening experience. How did you create this amazing wonderland?
Well, it just sort of came together. I guess you're right. We had very little experience indeed, but just as the garden grew, I guess we learned a little bit more about the plants and how to put them together and marry them up and get them looking nice.
And what was the whole object?
I wanted to create a botanical garden in the middle of the bush.
And it seems that's what's been achieved. But before a single plant was stuck in the ground, some major landscaping was needed to create a bit of horizontal out of the vertical.
The idea was to get the flat area here and then to move the driveway from the middle of the block to the edge of the block, just to maximise the size. The driveway is probably about 10 to 15 metres higher than the original ground level that was here.
And tell me about the soil.
There's very, very little soil at all. It's basically all rock through here. It's amazing how well the plants do once they're established, though. Very, very tough. You're basically planting them in rock with a bit of planting mix. And once they take root, they're actually quite healthy.
The planting was dictated by Judy's desire to fill the place with ornamental trees.
We wanted to establish the trees very early, and so we chose to bring in advanced trees, and that enabled us to give us a jump start.
What is it about the exotic plants that got you into it?
I think it's the variety they give in colour and texture. And so from the kaleidoscope of colour through autumn, the lovely leaves, and then through the, the blossoms of spring. It's art in itself.
Standing up here, you do really look down on the valley and you can see it's just a forest of trees. How many would you have in the garden?
I'd say probably a couple of hundred. A lot of them maples and your ornamental pears and cherries and plums.
Right.
All different varieties from different countries as represented as well. So it's a real botanical garden.
And I notice a beauty here, the good old Marla sinensis.
Oh, it's gorgeous. The Bletchel's crabapple is the one that welcomes our daughter's birthday every year. So she loves this one.
It's lovely.
It's her tree.
While exotic trees were Judy's first love, she now has a new passion. I do get the feeling that grevilleas are taking up a lot of your admiration.
They are certainly now, over recent years. While my first love is still the trees, and I would never give up any of those, I find the variety the textures, the colours within the grevilleas are quite exciting. There's so many, including species as well as the hybrids to choose from.
And the grafted ones too.
Oh, I think that's probably almost 90% of the grevilleas I'm putting in now are the grafted because I like the specky flowers. And this one, Jane, this is my favourite flower. This is a Grevillea strawberry sundae.
Doesn't it look like its name?
It does, doesn't it? The birds and the bees love it.
I love those little red ends.
Yes.
Now, there's a story behind this great big circle area. Tell me it.
Yes, the crop circle garden. We got the rocks in to plant on the slope here. I asked Jason, can I grab some of this lawn area? Because the lawn is sacrosanct for him. It's don't touch my lawn.
So before that went in, if you could imagine, this was like a big soccer oval. And I loved it because no one else in the neighbourhood's got any flat land, basically.
And it was just grass.
And Judy wanted to sneak a garden into the corner there.
Yeah.
So what would it be, 6 months after that? I want to get some birch trees in. We had to join those two gardens up with a garden bed, of course. What was happening is my beautiful big soccer pitch was slowly disappearing.
It was being nibbled into.
Well, it was. And basically where we stand now, I put a peg in the ground and I ran a string line out to the closest garden.
Yeah.
And then just ran around, and I think it was about 22 metres. Judy was happy because I basically said, look, everything outside of that circle, we're going to create new gardens. I got a grass area that I basically said, we're not touching anymore. This is it. And then we married the other gardens into it.
So you've got a good compromise now?
It's funny, we're always fighting. She's always telling me how to landscape things. I'm always telling her how to plant things.
Don't tell me how to plant things.
But we really are the perfect couple. We come together beautifully.
Meet in the middle.
Yeah, definitely.
Good, and the garden
It's all a
wins out.
compromise.
It's funny, isn't it? It's often the case when people fall in love with gardening that just when a garden seems complete, it's time for change.
The last couple of years, we could have had a break, but it's been about pulling out original gardens that we put in and putting in native gardens now.
Now, why is that?
I think probably around 5 years ago, I hadn't really noticed the bird life, and then it was almost overnight. I heard the wattle birds and I could see them every morning out the kitchen window, and from there I got the bug. I wanted to, introduce more bird species. So we have lorikeets and parrots and eastern rosellas and the eastern spinebills.
Are you happy with all of this move to take out the old and replace it with the new?
Sometimes. I don't let on. But it's a bit painful pulling out what I see are perfectly mature, beautiful-looking gardens to make room for the natives.
Another thing that really leaps out here is all the garden art that Jason's created.
Probably isn't garden art, it's just old farm equipment, rusty equipment. You put it in the right place and put a few nice plants around it and you call it garden art.
You both must be really pleased with what you've done in the garden.
Yeah, I think so. In terms for us, we're weekend gardeners. We work full-time, long hours, and I'm pretty proud of what we've achieved. Yeah,
Short period of time.
Yeah, that's right.
And plenty more to do.
Yes,
Heaps more to do.
unfortunately, the list is long.
I found a gap in my garden. I had a mass planting of camellias through here, which flowered really strongly for the first couple of seasons and then started to look daggy, so I've whipped them out. And now it's time to make even better use of the space. This is Eucalyptus erythrocorus, also known as Ilyari or red-cap gum. Now I'm just going to tease this a little bit so the roots come out of the root ball as it starts to grow, and then it's going straight into this hole. And then I'll backfill. I'll get some water onto it now. Right, now a really important tip when planting a tree of this size, which is 30 litres or above, is that you have to give it a really thorough watering in, not just to sort of hydrate it, but more importantly, to flush out any air pockets that can get caught in around that root ball. Okay, so I'm actually poking the bare end of a hose right down in there. You can see all the soil settling in, the tree's nice and firm. And I'll just smooth off the edge of the hole to form a basin. You can see how that's now shaped to hold a good 20 litres of water. Now, I've chosen this tree species very carefully. Firstly, for its habit, it'll grow up and fill this space very nicely. It'll arch up over the tank and on the other side over this driveway. Also, for its flowering time, it's the summer, early autumn flowering period. Now, the red bud caps will drop off onto the driveway, and I think that red sort of messy colour will look delightful. And then, of course, those gorgeous yellow flowers for the rest of that flowering period. At ground level, I'm planting a compact form of Scaevola crassiflora called Aussie Spirit. It'll grow 1 metre by 1 metre and put on lots of bright blue flowers in spring and early summer. Next door, a purple type of Myoporum parvifolium that'll sprawl out over the gravel. Then a light fertilise, some coarse mulch, and it's done. The overarching tip is that there's always room for more plants, even trees, if you pick the right species for the right spot.
Netting is one of the best ways to keep freeloading possums and birds from pilfering your fruit and veg and also digging up your seedlings. But you need to use the right materials in the right way. First off, the netting itself. Wildlife can get tangled and injured if the mesh size is too large or if it stretches. This mesh doesn't stretch, and the mesh size is small enough that I can't poke my finger through it. That means it's critter safe, provided it's taut. Creatures can still get tangled if it hangs loose. To keep it tight, you'll need to make a frame to stretch it over. How do you do that? Let's start at the beginning. Every situation is different, but for this raised bed, I'm making the frame from 25mm PVC irrigation pipe. I'm using saddle brackets as fixing points, then threading the pipe through to create ribs. I'm doing 3 ribs in all. The size of this bed here means that these ribs stand up pretty freely on their own. But if you had a wider or longer bed, you're better off putting a brace across the top, or you could put a brace along both sides. In this case, I don't need it. These are good enough. And now, on with the netting. The netting is white, so it's easy for birds to see. They'll be less likely to fly into it. I'm installing these little grommets along the entire edge of the netting so that when I pull it down under tension, it won't rip or tear. I'm using screws as anchor points for the grommets. This screw and grommet system is great because it's easy to remove the netting when you need to work in the garden. With the excess netting here on the end, I'm just twisting it up tight and I'm going to tie it off with a cable tie. Well, that's the job done. The right mesh and it's nice and tight. That way, all the plants inside will be safe and any little creatures outside that are thinking of getting in will be safe as well.
As you know, the plants I choose to grow in my garden have to be really tough. They have to cope with our long, hot, dry summers and survive on no supplementary water once established. When it comes to being hardy and water-wise, this Nephofia winter cheer is an absolute winner. It's a clump-forming perennial to 1.2 metres high by about as much wide. It has evergreen, thick grass-like foliage from which dozens of spectacular reddish-orange flower heads emerge in winter and on into early spring. The flowers stand well above the foliage and the nectar-feeding birds just love them. It doesn't ask for much, just full sun, and because this variety flowers in winter, it survives on natural rainfall alone, unlike the summer flowering varieties which require supplementary irrigation. The species are originally from South Africa, so they're tough, dependable garden doers. Gnaphofia winter cheer. Plant it, forget it, enjoy it, and share it with the birds.
My name is David Fripp. I'm a plant collector on the central coast of New South Wales. I've been doing so for 50 years. Well, not quite 50 years, but good enough. This plant here is Ripsalis campos podoana. It's one of the South American epiphytic succulents. One of the best basket plants you ever come across. I've had this plant since it was quite literally that big. So it's about 8 years old now, and it's just coming into full flower, and you can hear it full of bees. This one here's another one. This is Ripsalis platycarpa. This piece here actually isn't a leaf, it's actually a modified stem. Every single node in there is actually a leaf. It's the same family as the campos podoana, but they look nothing alike each other. And for me, that's just such an extraordinary thing to behold. I grew up on the mountain on a stone fruit orchard just up the road. And because I was born with a bleeding disorder called haemophilia, a severe haemophilia no less, I hemorrhaged internally. So the practicalities of working on a farm just weren't really there. Most haemophiliacs were locked up and not allowed outside, and because they bled, and it was pretty ordinary. Mum never did that. I was always allowed to run around outside. When I was a teenager, I used to come down the road here to the farm that I'm on now and worked with my aunt who had a fern nursery. And I think that's where the real passion and interest for plants began. And yeah, and it's never stopped. So this is a Streptocarpus. So being a hybrid, I can't set seed on it, or I can set seed on it, but it won't come true to type. So to make sure I can produce it so that the new plants look exactly like this one, I'll do this one from leaf cuttings. So I just launch inside and cut a leaf off. I cut the leaf up into sections. But one of the fascinating things that I find about Streptocarpus is that it actually produces flowers up the vein of the leaf. So each one of those will grow a brand new plant out of it, or actually a cluster of plants. I was self-employed from the day I left school. I got a job down the road on a flower farm. The third day in, the guy said to me, "Look, I'm thinking of retiring. Are you interested in growing flowers, taking over the business, taking over my customers?" So yeah, it was everything I did, wherever I was always involved in plants. Mum passed away when I was 19. At that point, I moved to Sydney, where I spent 10 years doing garden maintenance, working for the high end of town, which was great. Loved it, absolutely adored it. And then my flatmate and best friend passed away. And that was it, I'd had enough. The city became big and ugly, and it was time to move back home. So I started the nursery. And then over the years, it just expanded. One of the things that really excites me is being able to find something that may be completely different that I haven't seen before, and to be able to grow them and expose people to them and reintroduce them back into availability if people are interested in them is something I find really exciting. So you go from this fella, which is a Drinaria, which is a native basket fern, grows in trees in Queensland. In really dry times, it'll drop all its main fronds, and you'll just get this basket of sterile fronds sitting down below. So for me, you've got that to this fella, closely related to African violets, but I don't know. If you told me that was an African violet relative, I told you you'd need your head examined. But it is, I mean, with these beautiful furry underside of the leaves, which once it gets bigger, it ends up like that. It gets a cortex on it, which is almost like a potato, and it's food storage to go through hard times. And as it gets older, the cortex will push out of the soil. An example of what I love about plants are the Hupersia. I mean, commonly called a tassel fern, totally misnamed because it isn't a fern. It predates ferns by probably tens of thousands of years. As much as it's a vascular plant, it is more closely related to moss than it is to ferns. So it's an evolutionary link between this mound of green soft stuff to something that's evolved to have a vascular system. That's what plants are all about. You can never know it all. So they're an incredible, diverse group of beings. For me, to wander up and walk through the garden or walk through one of the greenhouses with the plants and just have a look at what's going on for the day, and it's such an amazing life, and to be surrounded by nature and by plants, and you know, it's just, yeah, you can't buy it.
Well, that's this job done and the show for another week. But don't despair, you can keep in touch with us through Facebook, Instagram, and of course our website for all your gardening inspiration. Now, let's take a look at what's coming up on next week's show.
I'm going to show you how you can take one bag of potting mix and customise it to grow a whole lot of different plants.
If you're going to have a productive garden, what better place than a prison? And I'm visiting one that's changing lives not only on the inside, but also on the outside.
My team and I have only recently moved in here, and we're determined to make it a healthy, happy and productive workspace. Now, to achieve this, the plants we've chosen will not only look great, but we're also going to put them to work.